people wonder, how come your name is Elton? So tell us your real name. Well, it's my real name. Actually, I was born in Albania in 1976. And it was a time when we were just about to break with our Chinese communist brothers. Actually, we had a love relation with them for about 10 years with Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution and everything. And what happened is that in 1967, so a few years earlier, Albania had decided that this is going to be the first non-religious country in the world. They had banned any religion, and they tried to have local families be persuaded not to name their children after, religious leaders. So they allowed Eltons and Elvises be used among the young generation, actually. And although our parents had no right to listen to Elton John, their children had the right to be named after him. I don't think you would go to jail, but it depended on what kind of family you were coming from. But, it could be a big trouble to be caught listening to Elton John or the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or something like that. We were in the middle of this cultural revolution. And well, I had my childhood in this country, actually, right in the city center in Tirana. Of course, it was communist. It was not communist. It was Stalinist. It was kind of a North Korean style of a country. It was probably really bad, but to be honest, we had a wonderful childhood, let's say, with all the lacking of food or lacking of clothing or fancy or communication or fancy, like toys or communication with the world. But still, Tirana was a city with no cars at that time, so it was a big playground for the rest of us. Our parents had no cars. There were a lot of restrictions, a lot of things that you couldn't do, but there was one thing that you could do. You could just go and play, let's say, even 5 miles away from your home, and there was absolutely no problem, and we were always a big bunch of kids. And, we were enjoying life. There were a lot of butterflies at that time, birds and all these things. We used to invent toys because they were not very common at that time to go and buy toys at the shops, but we were good and inventive. And that went like that, then with the fall of the wall of Berlin, Albanian communist regime also fall. That happened, let's say, officially in December 1990. And I've seen that with my eyes. It was the time I passed from elementary school to high school, or gymnasium, as we call it here. And let's say that the first 2 or 3 years of gymnasium, we went to school, but we also went to a lot of protesting against the regime, against the nostalgic part of the regime and all those things. The 90s were difficult, to be honest. It was not an easy task to cross from such an isolated country into a new freedom, democracy, Western style, as we all were dreaming and expecting it to be. Well, it's not. There is unfortunately no red button that you go and press, and from a totalitarian country, it becomes a democratic country. You need to learn how to use this tool, which is democracy. And it's not easy, it's like driving lessons. You will need to go through some lessons and do some mistakes. And we did our mistakes in the 90s, especially. Albania was also surrounded by former Yugoslav countries, and there were the wars in former Yugoslavia. So we were right next door to it. It ended with the 90s with the war in Kosovo, which is next door to us. And, it's massively inhabited by an Albanian speaking population. We were really, let's say, influenced by all these. And then these all ended, thank God. And let's say that from the year 2000 until nowadays, we've seen, our democracy and our lifestyle westernizing and getting better and better and better. And in 2000, I moved to Geneva, actually. I went to study in Geneva. Before that, I had been working in Kosovo for the UN, actually for the UNHCR with a refugee crisis program. And then I moved to Geneva for my real studies. Let's say I spent 6 years of my life there. I studied French language and civilization, and then I had a master's degree in development studies. But let's say that since a child, I had this, probably very weak ability when it came to exact sciences. I was really bad in mathematics, in physics, in chemistry, but I was good in languages. I was interested in literature, in, let's say, adventures and nature and all these things. So I probably kind of built a little bit of a dream for my future in the travel. And after I came back from Geneva in 2006, I had a couple of experiences working for some hotels in Tirana, and then for an American investment fund. And then I started this small company, which we called Albanian Trip at that time, with my girlfriend at that time, actually, and a friend of ours whose name is George Mihali, which is exactly George Michael. Actually, we started the company, the three of us, and it evolved, like in getting more known and working with amazing visitors from all over the world, mainly Western. It evolved with my girlfriend Vilma becoming my wife and the mom of my children nowadays, and everything went amazingly until, of course, the pandemic arrived. 1/4 of the country has this plain in front of it. It's full of lagoons. It's a beautiful station for migratory birds. It's a great place where we also